Okay, well, good afternoon. It's the 30th of September 2021 and I'm sat here in Chingford with Phil Lightfoot for No Ordinary Lives, and we're going to talk today about football culture in East London. So Phil, perhaps we could start, you could just give us a brief introduction to yourself.
I was born in 1956 in Plaistow General Hospital in East London. My parents were in the process of moving from Forest Gate to Barking, so it was Barking where I grew up from the age of 0 to the age of 20 when I moved out of the family home.
Right, okay. So what are your sort of early memories of football culture?
I believe my dad took me to my earliest football matches at Barking FC. They had a ground in the centre of Barking called Vicarage Field, and it was a very atmospheric ground with little stands on either side and just open ends. And yeah, I enjoyed going to those games with my dad.
And that would have been the sort of late 50s? What kind of crowds would you get at those type of games?
I used to get a good couple of hundred in the ground. It was interesting. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But then my dad decided it was time for me to gravitate to a higher level, and he took me to my first West Ham game in 1965.
All right, okay. And what do you remember of that day? You would have been, what, about 8?
About 9, yeah, 8 or 9. The game was West Ham versus Everton. Everton were a very, very big team at that time. So West Ham, were probably not predicted to win that game, but they did win it 3-0. And a little winger called Johnny Sissons had a great game. And I think he laid on a couple of goals and scored one himself. It's
interesting, isn't it? We all have, I have quite clear memories of my first game of football, going to watch Huddersfield, obviously. And the same for you? Was it like, obviously 3-0 was a great result. What were your feelings at that point, having seen that game?
Well, the game, we were sitting in the main stand, sort of quite high up and away from the pitch, and I was fascinated by the ground, the structure of the stand. I'd never been in such a stadium with it was just massive to me.
And what about the noise? Did you find that intimidating? Did you enjoy it?
I can't really say I've got any memories of the noise, Tom, but obviously we banged in 3 goals and there must have been quite a roar when those goals went in. Yeah. So I was hooked straight away.
And were there any players? Obviously you talk about the player who got the goals, but anybody stand out initially? Was it sort of? Obviously West Ham had a pretty star-studded team at that point.
Yeah, of course we had Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst, and Martin Peters. But the only player that I can remember from that game was definitely Johnny Sissons. He was a very capable winger. And it was a great shame that he never went on to play for England.
So you went with your dad to that first game. Was that the start? Did you then continue that season just going, or was that a one-off at that point?
No, we went to a few more games that season. I can remember us playing Manchester United just before the end of the season, and of course the ground was absolutely packed for that game. And in fact, West Ham won that game as well, 3-2.
Yes.
And I can remember, being hemmed in by the crowd, and my feet were lifted off the ground. The crowd I was just carried by the crowd, as they swayed, as the action took place.
It's funny because of obviously everything being all seated now. You kind of, when I'm thinking of it, I'm thinking of you sitting, but obviously then it was mainly terraces and standing, and you were standing, yeah.
Yeah, for that game we was on the terraces.
Yeah.
And I've got a memory of I've collected football programmes from games all my life, but I can remember in those days they used to get some rogue program sellers. So they'd sell a souvenir programme, which would be probably, you might be lucky to get a team sheet in it and a few adverts, but certainly wasn't worth the money.
Ah, right, okay. So these weren't fanzines, they were kind of counterfeit.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, okay. And what would you be wearing? I mean, did you have a scarf? Were you sort of kitted up as a young kid with all the gear, or what would you be taking to the match?
I can't rightly remember whether I had a scarf in those early days, Tom. Obviously, within a while, I would have been a scarf wearing fan for games. Yes.
And you go with your dad in those early games, or would you go with your mates?
I think I went with my dad for about 2 seasons, and then after that it was with my mates.
Yeah.
I can remember going to a couple of away games early on with my dad. Either on we went to Ipswich on the train and Southampton on the coach. And I can remember my very first away game was at Spurs West Ham, and Spurs slaughtered West Ham 5-1. And my dad, I was very miserable at the end of the game, and my dad had tried to cheer me up by saying, "Don't worry, son. At least West Ham kept them out to the 38th minute." As though that was going to be a compensation.
So your dad was obviously a big fan.
Yeah, I think West Ham was his club. Yeah.
And he'd been going all of his life.
Yeah. He used to pass on some memories to me. I remember him talking about a winger in the 40s or 50s called Foxall. And my dad used to tell this great story about how Foxall would be the butt of the crowd throughout the game. You know, they'd be catcalling him because he was so useless. And then in the last minute, he'd go on this weaving run, beat about five players and score. Yeah. And suddenly he'd become the hero. So
in the 60s, when you start to watch them, I mean, West Ham, as you say, had a really good team then, didn't they? It was under Ron Greenwood, I think, was the manager.
Yes.
Who, I mean, maybe give us some early memories of the likes of Bobby Moore and Martin Peters and Jeff Hurst. I mean, this was obviously just prior to the World Cup we started going to watch them. So, by 66 they were household names, weren't they?
Yeah. I've got great memories of those players. Bobby Moore especially, he was always my hero. You know, he'd lead the team out, his pristine his colours, his pure, his white shorts, and he'd come off the pitch at the end of the game, even though it'd been a muddy day, and there wouldn't be a spot of mud on his shorts. He was a majestic player. He was an absolute icon.
So it was his sort of, I hear what you say. But maybe if you just describe that in a bit more, what was his sort of, I mean, obviously he was a very stylish player, wasn't he? But maybe just tell us what really appealed to you about that, yeah.
Well, he always had this reputation for, he read the game so well. He knew, before he even got the ball, he knew where he was going to play it. He was always thinking ahead, and you could see that. You could see that as a fan. You could see his mind whirring, and then he'd get the ball and he'd pump it up to Hurst, or down the wing to Johnny Sissons. You know, he really was my hero.
Yeah. And who else then? Tell us a little bit more about that team. Who else stood out for you? I mean, obviously we mentioned.
Well, you asked about Hurst and Peters. Obviously, Jeff Hurst was a great goal scorer, and I'll never forget that we played Sunderland once and we hammered them 8-0, and Jeff Hurst got 6 of them. Although one of them, he admitted afterwards that he punched it into the goal. And the crowd was singing, instead of singing, West Ham 6 or West Ham 8, Sunderland 0, the crowd was singing Jeff Hurst 6, the rest of the team 2.
Okay.
And Martin Peters, you know, he had this. He was regarded by Alf Ramsey as 10 years ahead of his time, and he would float into the penalty area and score with a diving header. But I think Martin was a bit unlucky. I think Greenwood dropped him from a particular game leading up to the '64 FA Cup final, defeat by Blackburn, and Martin never really forgave Ron Greenwood for dropping him from the team after that. So it wasn't really a surprise when he left and went to Spurs in an exchange deal with the great late Jimmy Greaves.
Yeah, so okay, we come on to Jimmy Greaves, but in that sort of team of the mid '60s, there were other players obviously who stood out. Who else was caught your eye?
We had a goalkeeper called Jim Standen, quite a distinctive goalkeeper, very very capable. Ken Brown was the centre half alongside Bobby Moore, although he then got replaced. You know, he was getting on a bit in the late '60s, so he got replaced. Ron Greenwood bought a centre half from Celtic called John Cushley, and he was going to be the steel within the West Ham to make the defence watertight, so that to compensate, to match the skills up front. But poor John Cushley never matched up to Ron Greenwood's hopes. I think in one of his early games he kicked a centre forward up in the air, and allegedly after the game Greenwood said to him, "You'll never do that again." And and he completely lost his confidence after that.
Yeah. So on the field things were pretty good for West Ham. Obviously had some really world class players. What was it like sort of on the terraces then, as you sort of got a bit older? And you said you were going with your dad initially, and then started to go with your mates. What was your sort of match day kind of usual ritual, as it were?
Well, we'd meet up at Barking Station maybe, and then go 2 stops on the district line to Upton Park, and get there nice and early for the game. I think the early games we'd stand on the south bank, but the real singing end of the ground was the north bank. So I spent most of my days watching West Ham on the north bank.
And what are your memories of sort of standing on the terraces at that time?
Well, I can remember getting chucked out twice.
Oh, what for?
Because it was just pushing and shoving after a goal was scored. I think the police were on they were on extra money if they chucked someone out, because you saw it every game. A goal would be scored, and then there'd be like 5 West Ham fans had been marched out, and I was one of them.
So I can't imagine you were sort of a big troublemaker, but
no,
they just picked on you randomly.
It was just, when West Ham scored, we'd all jump up in the air, and then we'd sort of push each other around, and the police just sort of picked on us, just to show that they are the police, and they don't like people sort of any misbehaving wasn't allowed.
And at that point in the mid '60s, it was all pretty good natured. I mean, was there any sort of more serious fighting or hooliganism as it became known?
There were games where I can remember we played Manchester United in '67. '67. It was the last game of the season, and Manchester United needed to win to clinch the championship, and there was a lot of Manchester United fans got into the North Bank, and there was serious fighting. I haven't got any real memories of that, Well, I was at the game, but I was in the South Bank at the time.
What, they sort of snuck into that end, or did they sort of jump over some fences?
No, I think they got in, just through the turnstiles. There was no segregation in those days. Or, the police weren't particularly looking out to separate crowds in those days.
So, you forget that, yeah. So the grounds were pretty open. It wasn't just in a way and obviously caged in, and it was pretty much open, was it?
Yeah.
All right, okay. And so at that point you're still quite a sort of young teenager, I suppose. Would you be sort of going to the pub before or anything like that? Was it just meet up with your mates and straight to the ground?
Yeah, pretty much meet up and go to the game, and then just make our way home afterwards.
And you said you used to go to some away games. Can you remember any sort of particularly interesting away trips at that time?
One game was we were playing a testimonial game for a guy called Harry Cripps, a famous fullback for Millwall, and Harry Cripps decided he wanted to play West Ham because he had started at West Ham in the sort of youth team. So trouble was expected because it was Millwall and West Ham, and sure enough, it really did kick off.
So that was down at the Den, was it?
Yeah, the old Den.
So tell us about that trip.
Well, there was running fights all leading up to the game and during the game. And I can remember at one point running down Cold Blow Lane, and the guy next to me got hit by a bottle thrown from the Millwall fans, and he fell over. He just dropped to the floor, and I wasn't. I was too scared to actually stop and try and help the guy.
Yeah, just get out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I suppose
so that was that's quite like a so-called friendly testimonial. It turned out to be a riot.
Yeah, not necessarily a good choice of a friendly game, is it? So I suppose the atmosphere was starting to change at that point, was it? Did you sort of late 60s? Were things getting a bit sort of more serious in terms of the atmosphere?
Yeah. Every club had a section of hard nuts.
Yeah.
I wasn't a fighter. I just loved the adrenaline of the atmosphere,
Yeah.
But I wasn't leading the charge in any way.
And you were still obviously enjoying the team. And how were they doing at that point? Sort of late 60s, 70s.
A bit hit and miss. West Ham was always the teams. At the start of the season, the pundits would be saying, this is West Ham's season, this is going to be West Ham's season, they've got all the right players, they've got Bobby Moore, they've got Jeff Hurst, Martin Peters as well in those days. But, as soon as the season started, or certainly by Christmas, we were struggling. I think that was the start of my disillusionment with West Ham, was the frustration of having some great players but never being moulded into a team that challenged.
But remind me, what silverware did you win during those years from the start, say in 65?
Well, 60. When I started going, we just won the European Cup Winners' Cup in 65 against TSV Munich, and then after that we didn't win any more honours until 1975 when we won the FA Cup against Fulham.
Yeah. By
which time Bobby Moore had left West Ham and he actually played against West Ham for Fulham, of course.
So before we get there, so the late 60s, early 70s, you had these players, but as you say, it just wasn't really translating into sort of silverware.
Yeah, we got to the League Cup final in the mid-60s against West Bromwich, back in the days when it was a two-legged affair, not played at Wembley. But we lost that one, and that was the nearest we got to challenging for honours in those days.
And tell me a little bit about the sort of football fashions. I mean, obviously later on you had the sort of casual and stuff, but in the sort of 60s, early 70s, what was sort of, what were the footy fans wearing? Was it just, you think of perhaps East London and you think of the sort of skinhead, suede head sort of fashions, but maybe you could just describe what football fans were wearing.
Yeah, there'd be a skinhead element. They'd be dressed in their Ben Sherman shirts and their button-down shirts and braces, Levi jeans and Dr. Martens, of course. And then later on, you got the sort of more soul boy look with blokes in their tank tops, which became quite popular at the time.
And sort of music-wise, what were you kind of listening to at that point? Was that a big part of your, alongside football? Was that a big part of your sort of youth?
Absolutely, Tom. I was very into my soul from an early age, but I did have sort of quite a mixed taste. I also liked some rock bands, like prog rock stuff like King Crimson and Pink Floyd, and also reggae. I had probably the skinhead era brought in a lot of reggae to white kids, and Prince Buster, Al Capone, is one of my earliest reggae, Jamaican music memories.
And would you be going to clubs around that time as well? Would that be part of the sort of weekend culture?
From about the age of 17, I was going to, I think they called them discotheques even in those days. Listening to groups like Kool and the Gang, funky stuff.
Yeah. So West Ham having obviously players coming through at the time, people like Trevor Brooking, I imagine, broken into the team, Harry Redknapp, so again, good players. And as you say, in sort of 75, tell me about the FA Cup and your memories of that.
Yeah. The
run and obviously the ultimate victory.
Yeah. We did get to one semi-final just before 75. We got in 1972. We got to the semi-final against Stoke City, and we had an epic three games against Stoke. We beat Stoke at Victoria Ground, which was their old ground, away, and then we played them at Upton Park, and all we had to do was get a draw, but unfortunately John Ritchie scored for Stoke, and Jeff Hurst had a penalty saved in the last minute by the great Gordon Banks.
Wow.
So that led to 2 replays, and ultimately we were knocked out 3-2 on Manchester United's ground by Stoke, who went on to win the League Cup.
Did you travel to that game?
I certainly did. The longest journey home I've ever done. We were absolutely soaked up the old scoreboard end at Manchester United. It rained all through the game, and it was a real sad day because Bobby Ferguson, the keeper, got injured in a clash with Terry Conroy, and Bobby Moore had to replace him in goal for a spell. He did manage to save a penalty, but Peter Dobin scored from the rebound.
So leading up to the FA Cup win in '75, Bobby Moore left, and that was a turning point for you in some ways, wasn't it? I think as a West Ham.
I think I really do trace my disillusionment with West Ham down to that time when Moore fell out of favour with West Ham. He played a little while in the reserves and then left for Fulham.
And what was your sort of understanding of what happened there?
think Bobby Moore had struggled a bit with England. He had made a bad mistake against Poland, which ultimately led to England not getting to the World Cup in 1974. So I think he'd already always had a not very happy relationship with Ron Greenwood, and I think he just come to the end of his time there. But you know, it really took a piece out of my heart when Bobby Moore left West Ham.
Yeah. But then, ironically, they sort of go on to beat Bobby Moore's Fulham in the '75 FA Cup final. Tell me about your memories of that run and win.
I can remember what shirt I was wearing that day. There was a fashion at the time for bowling shirts.
Right.
And I managed to get a bowling shirt in West Ham colours. So that was my top for the day at Wembley.
And what about
the memories of the day?
The day, yeah. How did you get there?
I think I must have gone on the tube up to Wembley Park and gone to the game. But as I said, I'd lost a little bit of my ardour for West Ham already by then, and the game was a bit of a tepid game. We won 2-0 with 2 Alan Taylor goals, but it was far from a classic.
Yeah.
So it wasn't. I couldn't really get excited about the game.
Right. Okay. Which must have been telling for a football fan. You just won the FA Cup with your team, and you're feeling sort of slightly underwhelmed by it.
Yeah. There was another factor, Tom, in the semi-final, which led on to us getting to the final, was against Ipswich, and we played them at Villa Park, and unfortunately I got beaten up at that game, before the game.
Yeah.
And it was strangely enough I was beaten up by a West Ham fan.
Yeah, you said
and the only people that helped me were actually Ipswich fans.
Yeah, and that was just something over nothing.
I was accused of spilling a few drops of beer on the guy's trousers.
Yeah, caught unawares.
He decided he'd show off to his mates by what a big man he was by beating me up.
Yeah, so not a good experience in the semi-final, and obviously a disappointment. Well, not disappointment, but an underwhelming reaction to the final. So you carried on, and you've got a bit of memorabilia there from some of the European games that you went to.
Yeah,
maybe talk us through those, Phil.
So this is the 1975-76 European Cup Winners' Cup run, and this hat comes from the team we played in Helsinki, the game which I went to. I think there was only about 170 West Ham fans that travelled to Helsinki.
That is one hell of a trip, isn't it, Helsinki? It's not a quick sort of run over to Paris or, I don't know, even Madrid, is it? I mean, Helsinki must have been, I'm assuming obviously you flew.
We did fly. We didn't stay over though. We went straight, from the airport to the game. We had time for a beer in Helsinki town centre, I think. But then went to the game and then went straight back to the airport after the game.
Did you win?
Yeah, we did win. It was a bit of a struggle because we were playing this tiny side from Helsinki called Ripus Larden, who I'm not sure actually exists anymore. But I think we beat them away. We certainly over the 2 legs. We certainly won over the 2 legs.
Okay, well, take us to the next.
So that was the first game. I think the next game I didn't go to, which was a game against a side from Armenia. But then the next game was in Holland against a team called Den Haag.
Oh yeah.
Who certainly do still exist. So this is what the Den Haag supporters of the day were wearing.
And what are your memories of that trip?
I can remember some West Ham fans decided to steal bicycles because there was of course, being Holland, there was a load of bicycles parked up in racks before the game, and some idiots decided just to be idiotic and to take the bicycles and chuck them in the canal or something.
All right.
And we won. I think we won away, or was it a draw? I can't remember. But so we won over the two legs. So we went on to play
third and final hat.
Eintracht Frankfurt.
And what are your memories of Eintracht or Frankfurt?
Just vague. I think we went on the coach to that one. And all I can remember is that Graham Padden, the midfield player, scored West Ham's goal. I think it was a 1-1 draw. So all rested on the home leg, which we got through.
And you made it to the final.
Yeah.
And tell me about the final.
The final was against Anderlecht in their home stadium by coincidence. The Heysel Stadium, which of course has sad memories for Liverpool fans and Juventus fans. That day when West Ham got there, Frank Lampard Senior made a bit of a boo-boo and conceded a goal which gave Anderlecht the impetus to go on and win the game 4-2. I think it was. I think Trevor Brookins scored for West Ham.
So ending ultimately in disappointment.
Yeah.
And, okay, so you've had some silverware. You've won the FA Cup. Obviously, you've had a good run in the Cup Winners' Cup the following season. But your disillusionment is now obviously advancing.
Yeah.
Tell us about the sort of end of your time at West Ham and your ultimately your sort of movement, your change to your latest club.
Well, it all started back in '69 when my mate said West Ham were playing too far away, so we decided to do something on the Saturday afternoon. We'd go down to the Orient, Leighton Orient, that is. So we went down there and watched the West Ham play. Orient play Brighton in the old third tier,
right.
Third division, and it was a 1-1 draw. And Terry Mancini scored the goal for Orient. And
so this would have been like 75, 76?
69.
Oh yes, sorry, this was earlier.
69.
Yeah.
So this is it's not long after I've become a regular at West Ham, really.
So you're already starting to flirt.
Well, it was to start with. It was just something else to do, something to do on a day when I couldn't watch West Ham.
A bit on the side.
Yeah, maybe.
And so you'd continue to see Orient sort of on away games sometimes when West Ham were sort of far away.
Well, Orient had a tremendous season that season, and they actually ended up being the champions of the third tier and going up to the second tier. And I saw most of their home games that season.
Right. Okay.
So it really did spark something in me. By the end of the season, but my first club was still West Ham, and remained so right up until 1978.
Right.
When I eventually had enough of West Ham and moved lock, stock and barrel.
Okay, so we talked about disillusionment, obviously when Bobby Moore left. But what kind of made the final? What was the final sort of, I suppose, reason for cutting ties?
I become very hyper as a fan watching on the terraces. I become very hypercritical of any sort of failings of the current West Ham side. And I just become that bloke behind you who's constantly bellowing and swearing at the
I know the type.
at the poor performance on the pitch. And eventually I just I thought, sod this, I don't want to do this anymore. Whereas at Orient, it was good to, for them to they were just surviving in the second tier, and it was a positive for me to see them doing.
You were more forgiving.
For such a small side to be doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Whereas West Ham were always a sort of a disappointment.
So you certainly weren't glory hunting.
No, quite the reverse, really.
So the smaller ground, the less pressured maybe leagues, was that appealing then? Was that just sort of? Yeah,
I really got my enjoyment out of watching Orient, which I wasn't getting watching West Ham.
And they had some good players, didn't they? They had some exciting players at that time. Maybe talk about a few of the players that caught your eye in the sort of late 70s.
Well, first of all, that season when I switched completely was again we were playing in 77, 78. We got all the way to the FA Cup semi-final that season, and the hero of that cup run was a striker called Peter Kitchen, who had only just joined Orient at the start of the season. And the manager got sacked. The manager that signed him, George Petchy, got sacked. So it wasn't an auspicious start, but we ended up on a mighty cup run all the way to the semi-final.
So who was managing at that point?
Jimmy Bloomfield, who had been the manager when I first started going to watch them. He came back to Orient he was the manager at that time, although he was quite ill during the cup run, and it was probably the assistant manager who probably took charge of the side at that time, a guy called Peter Angel.
Right. And who else was in the team at that point who you kind of took to?
Well, we had John Jackson in goal, who we'd got from been long-serving good keeper at Crystal Palace, but also made well over 100 games for Orient. He was a very, very reliable keeper. We had a defender called Bobby Fisher. We had a great little winger called John Chidozie, Nigerian international, who was a little pocket rocket. We had Big Joe Mayo up front, who had been a makepiece in the deal that took Laurie Cunningham from Orient to West Brom.
So you saw Laurie Cunningham obviously play for Orient prior to that, didn't you? I suppose during the sort of early mid-70s.
Yeah, I think he broke into the Orient team in 74, 75, and it was marvellous to see the effrontery of the guy. He would 17, 18 years old, and he would stop the game dead. He would just stop the game with the ball at his feet and just entice the defenders to come and make a fool of himself by tackling him.
Yeah.
And he had such speed.
Did Cunningham and Chidozie play in the same team at all?
No. Laurie Cunningham was before John Chidozie.
Yeah. I mean, what if? Imagine those two in the same team.
Yeah.
So at this point, I suppose today we're not going to talk about Orient and obviously the 30 or 40 years subsequent to this, but at this point your ties with West Ham had gone completely, or do you still look out for the results? Are there any looking over your shoulder thinking, oh yeah, I might pop back? Or is it...
I've completely severed my connections with West Ham now. I still have fond memories, which I hope comes across in this broadcast, fond memories of my times, of, watching West Ham, but no, I could never go back, and I don't even look for the results anymore.
Well, thank you for giving us, your story as a football fan, and it's an interesting one. But thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you, Tom.